Good morning, folks, and thank you all so much for coming out to the third of our weekly live Q&As in our Royal Family series with Shinan Govani. Over the next 20 minutes or so, Shinan and I will be digging deep into the wonderful questions you sent us this week in response to his third lecture, variety of themes. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask you all at home to join me in giving a warm welcome to our fearless leader, Shinan, the House of Windsor. So I'm going to jump right into it because we've got quite a few interesting themes to touch on this morning. And the first area we're going to look at is Queen Elizabeth's relationship with the animal kingdom. Now, in your lecture, you and our guest this week, Richard Bertelsson, talked a little bit about her fondness for corgis, but our audience member Cynthia wrote in to ask a little bit about another obsession of the Queen's. Cynthia writes, in The Crown, they make a big deal of the Queen's horse obsession, even going so far as to suggest that she would have rather spent her days as a full-time horse breeder than fulfilling all of her burdensome royal duties. Is this a fair characterization?
I think relatively, yes. I think there's little doubt that had the Queen not ascended to the throne in some alternate scenario in the countryside, with her horses and her dogs. I checked in with our guest from last time, Richard, who also seemed to agree. He said, if she had not been a member of the royal family, she may well have chosen an occupation related to horses, such as breeding, training, racing, or perhaps even veterinary science. The Queen has often said that she could not imagine she was born at a different time in a different environment. We can see that, maybe it would have taken this turn. And she does come about her love of horses fairly naturally. I mean, it was to Queen Anne, who was an avid horsewoman. It's in her blood, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Over the last few months, amid the global pandemic that we're living through right now, Gladys writes that she read that the Queen and Prince Philip are currently being looked after by a team of 20 long positions, or is there a lot of turnover? I imagine it must be a demanding and challenging job.
It's an interesting question. It's one I've had as well. Sort of the staffing situation does look at. So he wrote in to tell us that there is a hierarchy in the palace staff. There is the household, who are the most senior positions. Surprisingly, can sometimes be closest to those members of the staff because she's with them daily. So such as the footmen, the maids, the chef, others, particularly those who work in the royal mews where the horses are stabled. Among those with the Queen would be her private secretary, Edward Young, her dresser and personal assistant, Angela Kelly. Angela Kelly's come up a little bit recently because she wrote a book, which has been very well received, as well as her page, Paul Wybrew, and a groom for the horses, Terry Pendry. They all play key roles in Her Majesty's daily official and private life. They are likely joined, of course, as I mentioned, by some footmen, maids, some kitchen staff, staff from the Royal Mews, as well as Prince Philip's valet and some police detectives. And now during this time, they are forming what we know as a kind of an HMS bubble to keep the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh in a protective and safe bubble and away from contagion from the virus. So, yes, I think there's a plan, safe to say.
Right. I love that term, though, that's emerged, HMS bubble.
Right, yes.
yes. Yeah. So, yeah, that's certainly a unique
note to make is that unlike a lot of people who, have professional and personal lives and they're put in different compartments, the Queen, as just by the nature of her job, doesn't. Her life is her job. And so I think in terms of even the staff, I think there's a lot of interwoven stuff in terms of personal and professional.
Absolutely, absolutely. So shifting gears a bit, we received, there have been a few interesting references in our session so far to trooping the color, the official marking of the Queen's birthday. And so a couple of our audience members wrote in to ask if you could give us a little more information on this. So their background on this annual ritual.
Yeah, I mean, trooping the color really is sort of such a prime. So trooping the color essentially is a military ceremony, a military pageant, which marks the National Day in the UK. Now, while the Queen's own birthday is in April, I think I mentioned this in my lecture, the official celebration for trooping takes place in June when the weather is better. It is a major tourist attraction, and many people plan their vacation and travel to the UK to attend. Obviously, it's very colorful, very precise, well executed, and impressive to watch. It ends with a balcony appearance by the entire royal family, as well as a fly past from the Royal Air Force. The family gathering on that balcony is obviously always keenly watched by royal watchers, because there's always sort of up there, and who's standing by whom, etc. Now it starts a whole series of summer events, trooping, that many people can attend, such as the procession of the Order of Garter and the Royal Ascot Week. Canadians are able to apply for special tickets to those events, as we are a Commonwealth realm. Maybe some people didn't know this. As you mentioned, unfortunately, all these events are canceled this year. The Queen has own years, and indeed, the Queen even substituted for her father when he was king in 1951, when he was in ill health. And one more thing, this is interesting, I didn't know this until I looked this up as well. Trooping was held in Ottawa just once in 1939 with the King and Queen when they were in Ottawa, when they were visiting at that time. Pretty interesting.
Wow, fascinating. I love what you're saying, Shinan, the Queen's favor and who's not in any given moment. Yes, yeah, it's like the CIA watchers looking at photos
or like
the Soviet leadership.
Yes, during
in the Cold War. Yeah. It's fascinating. Indeed. Okay, a very interesting question here from Stephen, who writes, how do you
I don't know if it was closer than the relationship with Prince Charles. I mean, the relationship with your mother and your husband are inherently different realms. I do think it was a very close relationship, and she was one of the true supports that she had, who knew her, before she was queen, and was consistently there when she was queen. Actually was bowing to her daughter. From what I've read, the relationship between the Queen Mother and Margaret was even more complicated. I mean, in some ways, because perhaps they were more alike. And I mean, I read one story about how when they would come into a room, or go away to Balmoral or something, inevitably one would be closing the window in a room, and the other would be opening the window in the room. Like that. Died in 2002. And don't forget that the Queen Mother died just weeks later, like the next month in the same year. So she lost these two people that were, always there. And I think when the Queen went through the challenges that came with the divorces with both Diana and Fergie, the Queen Mother really was a support and gave a lot of advice. And I do think it's interesting, this triad of Margaret, the Queen, and the Queen Mother, because let's remember that it started off as there is this sort of scene during the inauguration of Queen Elizabeth II. It's been written about where someone says to Margaret, "Oh, you look sad," and Margaret said, "Forget when Elizabeth rose to the throne, that also meant the loss on a personal level of their father, but also the figurative loss of Queen Elizabeth as sister when she ascended."
In any family, the dynamics between siblings and parents are complicated enough as you get
yes,
older.
and then you add country and crown to it. Yes, yeah,
right. And as you say, this notion that the power dynamic within the family will dramatically change as as Queen Elizabeth then takes the throne, and is suddenly her mother, whose authority she's had to respect her whole life, now has to bow down to her as her sovereign, and not what the wrinkles that would throw into a relationship. It's
and also another point I wanted to mention was that the Queen Mother was very, very active as a royal. So when she left us, it really did create a hole in the way different things played out within the family. She was the patron of over 350 organizations and worked as the president of the British Red Cross, as well as the commander-in-chief of the nursing division of the St. John's Ambulance. So there was great affection for the Queen Mother. Don't forget, the Queen Mother, her life story is so linked with the war itself. The fact that the King and Queen didn't leave London, that stayed on during the Blitz and stuff. So, there's a lot of affection for the Queen, but some of the affection for the Queen comes through the affection for the deep love for the King and the Queen Mother that preceded her. It's all connected.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, Shinan, we're running out of time here, but there's one or two more really interesting questions I'd love to tackle here. One from Doris, who writes on a related theme to what we were just talking about, which is Queen Elizabeth's role as a mother. So we get the sense that as she transitioned into her role as queen, she was she's been very, very committed to her royal duties. But Doris asks, do you also get the sense that those duties rivaled and often superseded her role as a mother?
I think there's no doubt. I mean, that there was a tension. In some ways, a tension that any working mother feels, right? The whole idea of, can you have it all? Can you do both? Contrast with Queen Victoria, who rose to the throne at 18, but wasn't married or had children. So she had to sort of, enter that role. And there was obviously, she eased into the role a little bit more. And some say that the relationship with those two latter children was different. It was maybe a little bit warmer. But
right.
Yeah, all the usual family dynamics.
You have very strong feelings about the depiction of this very complicated, sometimes bordering on cold relationship between Queen Elizabeth and Charles. And I know you have some bigger thoughts on
in terms of the depiction in The Crown. We had Claire Foy, who played Elizabeth as the younger queen. I think Claire Foy does a good job as the tentative queen. As the still the girl, trying to enter this man's world in a way, and then Olivia Colman, and it is interesting to me reading some background about the casting and some of the acting decisions about Olivia Colman. One of the things people point out is that she has brown eyes. And the blue eyes of Elizabeth, the real queen, are such a prominent part of her visage, right? And so they tried putting contact lenses in Olivia Colman to do the scenes. and they would get the tape back, and the director and the creators of the show just felt like there was a distance, like it stopped some of the emotion having the contact lenses there, because Olivia Colman's such an intuitive actress, right? That there was just something about not being able to see something into her eyes, her true eyes, that stopped it. They also thought about CGI, and similarly, there was a problem. Something was lost in the emotion, so they went with the blue eyes, and I just think that's just an interesting acting choice. So I think they're both good, but in various different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it also, I think it speaks to this sort of the image making apparatus that surrounds these figures. They become larger than life, and they become as much about the mythological version of them that lives on as they do the flesh and blood people.
In terms of the show, you're almost doing a performance of the performance.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, I think, a great note to end on. That's a beautiful summation, and I think actually, in a funny way, a great transition to the iconic mythical figure who forms the subject of our next lecture, which is coming into your inboxes, including a really compelling guest interview with Alison Eastwood. Royals with you on Friday mornings. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll check in with you next week.
See you next week. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.